This morning with Tim Miller from Lionheart Security, and I've asked him to come on. Tim's been on before. Tim, I wanted to talk about what's happening in the world, how you can keep your family safe from all this craziness that seems to be happening. And I just wanted to get a sit rep real quick, the situational report, what's happening, what you're seeing. I know you've been on the news a lot lately. Starting with the attempted assassination a few weeks ago, and then it seems like everywhere around the world we're seeing, whether it's places like Paris and the attacks on the train system right before the Olympics started, and then we've had these stabbings in Great Britain. We have a lot of street violence happening with different groups of people roaming around, fighting each other, burning things down. And we're seeing a lot of things here still. We're seeing just an explosion of violence in a lot of our major cities, and even in the rural areas, we're hearing more and more reports of that. So can you give us a quick thing, what you're tied into? Because I know that you have a much broader network than I do.
Well, Matt, it's great to be with you as always, brother. Thanks for the great work you're doing and helping the individual person to prepare. And boy, we better be prepared. To your point, we're seeing stuff that you and I have never seen in our lifetime happening, and it all seems to be happening concurrently across the globe. If you look at what's happening in Israel, the world's eyes are on Israel right now. Right now, Israel is in a fight for its life. Obviously, Hamas has been a huge issue since October 7th, but it's way beyond that. Unfortunately for us and the West, Al Qaeda has been reconstituted, complete with modern equipment, thanks to us leaving Afghanistan and leaving that equipment. So, interestingly enough, which a lot of people don't understand this, that equipment is making its way across the world to Yemen and to other areas. Obviously, Hezbollah is fully engaged, charged, and ready. Iran has made no bones about the fact that they're going to attack Israel. You've got the Houthis in Yemen. You've got so to your point, the global issue is a problem, but then also, and you and I talked about this before, the presence here in the U.S. That's what's different. We've never had a full capability within our borders to hurt us. People that are unashamed and screaming death to America. People that have crossed in on the watch list. People that have said, hey, our agenda is to attack American infrastructure. So we are in a very, very difficult and tenuous time. You and I have talked about this, and we'll talk more about it, but it is time for every American to be prepared. Not afraid, not fearful, but wise and prepared.
Well, that's a great starting point. And the title of this video is Prepare or Perish, because if you're not prepared, you're going to panic when something does happen. And there's a weird thing that I think all of us just naturally do as human beings, where we think it's never going to happen to us. I mean, I never thought I was going to have a heart attack, and I had a heart attack this year. And of course, there are reasons why it happened. I had a hip replacement, and then I had a blood clot. But the fact is that the thing that I thought could never happen and never would happen happened to me. Now, it might seem, you say, well, it's a little bit more common that you would have that than a terrorist attack. And that may be true, but we know, back to what you were saying about leaving all the equipment in Afghanistan, it's more than that. And then being reconstituting Al Qaeda, reconstituting ISIS, rebuilding, that we know that there are real reports coming out saying that not only are we sending them $40 to $100 million a week in cash on a plane, that money is then distributed in Afghanistan to terrorist groups who are using it to train and prepare their soldiers, their foot soldiers, that have then been sent up through Central and South America into our borders and then in this country. We also know that historically we've had Hezbollah cells. We've had them all over our country, and that now they're saying, and one of the reports that I saw said that they're training some of these ISIS soldiers and all these other organizations that hate us and want to do destruction here, that they're training them so fast that they're sending them over without an organizational structure, but they're sending them with their commanders. So they're sending entire groups, and they're coming up. And then we've seen, some of that equipment you're talking about that gets around the world. They've seen that in Mexico, on the border being carried by cartels. They know that some of the people who are embedded with the cartels are Iranians, are people who speak Farsi. So they know that. I mean, these are real facts. These aren't things that you and I are making up. These are reports that we're getting from our own government officials, from the director of the FBI. And I think a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, all of the different heads of the intelligence agencies met with Congress, and they're all saying the same thing. You know, the attacks are imminent, they're inbound, they're coming, the threat's already here, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So how would you prepare? As I know that you work with churches, schools, you work with a lot of individuals on how to keep their families and their homes safe from a home invasion. I know that we talked about that recently, how you've prepared people for that, how you have people coming to your courses who've had home invasions. And the last time that you had a course coming up, I wanted to do a live and kind of push people from my channel into that information just so they could see it if it was something they were interested in. But your courses fill up so fast that I saw that you recently that you have a list of courses coming up later next month, I think next month going forward. And then
Right.
are there still openings in those courses? And if so, who are those for, and how would those courses help them with what we see happening now?
Well, thanks for mentioning that. The bottom line is that every person now better have a personal security plan. You and I've talked about this. We're already seeing test runs at our infrastructure. Why would entire airlines crash, not be able to fly? I shouldn't say crash. Their IT, networks
Right.
crash. Why would certain power grids go down? Why would 911 centers go down in tri-state, multi-state areas? I happen to believe that these are intentional tests against our infrastructure. Well, what does that mean for the average person? It means that you better think about what would you do if you lost the power grid. What would you do if the water supply was tainted? What would you do? These are the basics of human survival. But then you move into what would you do if the police couldn't respond? And folks, we need to understand law enforcement agencies across the country. Recently, obviously, I was involved in commenting on the Secret Service, having been an integral part. Let me tell you, that was amazing to me in terms of the mission failure. Now, I know a lot of great men and women in the Secret Service. This is not a wholesale condemnation, but let me tell you, folks, the mission to protect President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania failed, and it failed miserably. Well, the bad news is we've got a lot of organizations across the government that are failing now. Why? Because they're no longer focused on hiring the smartest, the best, the most experienced. They're going to hire certain groups. And when that happens, that means your ability to perform the mission is at risk. And that includes police agencies. I get I get a lot of calls from police officers who tell me, you're not going to believe who we're hiring. Folks, we wouldn't have even thought about hiring 10 years ago. We're hiring now, and they're the ones charged with protecting you and I. And that's scary because, like in the state of Illinois, they're actually considering hiring non citizens as police officers. I don't know where that legislation is. I know Pritzker's pushing it. Folks, that's horrifying. The police are there to protect our rights. How can a non citizen protect our rights? So I think to your point, Matt, every single family, I am not a woe is me person. I'm not a fear driven person. But a wise person looks at this and says, okay, what do I need to support my family? Food, water, power if necessary, backup. But then also, what are the practical skills? And our training, quite frankly, is by the best of the best. Our goal, we have, if you go on the website, lionheartsecurityteam.com, and look at the events page, you'll see a variety of trainings. We do what's called family protection training, which is how, number one, to understand the utilization of your weapon, but also medical. How do you care for people that have been injured? And then also the virtual training that we do with Milo Range, which enables you to know when to take force, when to utilize force. A lot of folks train on a range how to use force with their weapon, but this is when to use it. And that's what'll keep you out of jail. But I think I can't stress enough to folks, now is the time to prepare. Please prepare. because I think we could see an example coming up, the Democratic National Convention. I think if you're a Chicago area resident, you need to be fully prepared for a worst case scenario. And I think if you're not prepared and it sneaks up on you, that's a big problem.
Absolutely. I just had an interruption. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. My camera froze on my side. It's something weird with this new software. But so I did put a link in the description to your courses if anybody wants to go and look at that. But back to what you were saying about like grid down.
Right.
Um, and I think one of the biggest recently, the two things that they keep saying that the professionals keep saying, law enforcement professionals, intelligence agency professionals go in front of Congress, in front of the Senate, and they're saying that we expect attacks like October 7th, mass numbers of attacks in areas, at churches, at schools, but they also are talking about these attacks on the grid, on the infrastructure, where we'll be without a power for month after month. Now, we know most people only have food for 3 days or less. Some people probably don't have food for, 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But when that happens and everybody's hungry and they can't get food, and they come to your house and looking for what you have in groups and mobs, does your training provide instruction for things like that?
Yeah,
The
we have.
home invasion, and home invasion, if it's one of these criminal aliens who are here from one of these violent gangs from South America or from Africa that they're shipping over, or just homegrown groups of people who are coming in. Do you
Yeah.
have
So
that specific?
go ahead.
No, just the courses that you're offering, they I can't. What I'm trying to say is I can't emphasize enough how important it would be to learn how to protect my family, my
Right.
children. If you have grandchildren, if you have a husband or a wife, or just yourself. And I've taken a lot of courses similar to the ones that you have. Nothing to the level of sophistication that you offer, because I think your mental training and the Milo Gear training that you do goes above and beyond anything that I've seen. I've done a lot of the courses, Navy SEALs, the Delta Force operators, the shooting stuff, which is fun and it's great. And it's things that I had done before. But the things that I see you offering are a lot different. So the mental part is what I'm getting at. How do you mentally prepare for something like a home invasion, or a group, a mob coming at your house? And how do you stay in a reasonable space so you can make the right decisions to protect yourself and your family?
Yeah, and that's really the most important part. I mean, some of the research that we went into deep dive with the Homeland Security research, and they did neurological studies on how you actually do respond in the midst of a crisis. The three things we've all heard: fight, flight, or freeze. Well, we know if you don't train the mind, if you don't have dynamic, we call it imaginative and emotional training, meaning that you're living out scenarios in your mind and actually in our training. If you don't have that kind of training, you're likely to either default to freeze, which is the worst case scenario, or to flee, which could be the worst. We need to be able to think clearly, calmly. We need to have a plan. We need to be able to encourage, inspire others, because you may be the only person in that crowd that has training, knows what to do. And it's not just about saving yourself, it's about saving your family as well. And I will tell you, having been in crisis situations, when you have that kind of training, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, your chances of being able to rise up and to help save people's lives go up infinitely. The research said that 90% of what you need in a crisis situation is mental. Now, you do have to have the other skills: how to fire, how to, what is cover and concealment, all that kind of stuff. But we kind of train the combination. And I'll tell you, if we're not wise and prepared now with what's coming down the pike, I think many are going to find themselves, it will be too late. And I hope and pray that everybody that's listening is getting training from wherever. I know there are people from all over the world that can't make it to Florida for our training, which is fine. Get good training. And people always ask me, how do I vet the training? Well, you really do need to look closely at who the instructors are, what they've done and what the material is that they're presenting. If it's all fear based and it's all emotional, it's probably not the best training for you. You need realistic training, but it has to be training that's designed to develop skill. Skills are what we need today, not a bunch of hype. Nobody's going to make you a SEAL. Nobody's going to make you an SF guy in a week or 3 days. But they can certainly equip you with mental, physical, emotional skills to survive in a crisis. So I think that's the biggest thing. If people, dads, moms, everybody starts going, okay, what would I do if there was a power outage? Okay, let's plan for that. What would I do if there were mobs out of control? And again, I think Chicago is going to experience that next week. We're going to see a lot of anger and violence directed at Chicago next week. So, if you're in the Chicago area, now would be a good time. Like Matt said, it's not just 3 days of food. You need 3 weeks of food. You need to be able to function safely within your home, or if you're going to leave, you have to have a place to go because this stuff can happen quick. And you don't want to be one of the millions of people trying to figure it out after it happened. You want to be the person that's prepared.
Absolutely. And next week in Chicago is the Democratic National Convention, which is what I think you're talking about, right? But in
Right?
Chicago, also, that Governor Pritzker, he, not just him, but the legislature there, with his blessing and signature, they passed the no cash bail for the whole state. So not only are they trying to restrict your ability to defend yourself, but then they're letting the criminals who could be kept away from us and keep us safe, they're just letting them right back out. So they commit the crime, they see the judge, and then they're back on the street. And we know that's true, and that's happening again and again. But back to what you were saying with your course and the differences, I did put the link in the description below so people can go and see what it looks like if they're not able to come, and they can recreate it wherever they are or look for the type of training. But one of the things that's enticing about what you're doing, because I have been to so many other courses, is that, and having been in my industry for so long and understanding there's a difference between a person who can do the thing and a person who can teach the thing.
Right.
And your instructors are instructors. They're at the highest level. So there's the tier one operators, a lot of them. They've been there, they've done that, but they also have learned how to transmit the material and get the students up to speed very quickly. And I think that's a really cool distinction, because I have been to courses where the instructors, they're big, tough, tattooed, bearded, awesome dudes who've done a lot of cool things, but they're not necessarily great instructors. I have been to some with great instructors, but I think that the biggest difference is that you go with the top line people who are also top of the line instructors. So the information is going to permeate faster. People are going to come up to speed quicker and be able to feel confident in the skill that they have to protect themselves and their families. So back to what we're saying about Chicago groups. If you happen to find yourself like outside, and I want to open up the conversation that we're having to the chat. So if you have questions and you're watching, you're in the chat right now, or if you watch this later and you want to put them in the comment section, we'll get back to you with an answer. But if you have a question, put it in the chat now, and then we'll start to answer it. I see Bags is here from Nova Scotia. Libertarian Minded says, always expect the unexpected. Elitist says, good morning. Good morning, Kelly. And Venner Bronkhorst says, hello, Matt, Uncle Tim. Venner is in South Africa, which is also
Wow.
an area where we know that there can be a lot of
Yeah.
violence from time to time. So
Yeah.
let's say you are maybe in Great Britain or Ireland, because something happened there this morning that might touch off a lot of big angry groups of people coming at each other, and you just happen to be out with by yourself, or you're with your family, you're going to dinner, or you're going to work, and you happen to find yourself in one of these areas. You turn the corner, there's the violent mob, and I've heard you talk about this before. What are some of the tips that you have to survive that, get out of there, not become a victim of something that you have nothing to do with, and just an unfortunate event? So we talk about prepare or perish, prepare or
Yeah.
panic. You see it coming. If you've prepared mentally, what are the steps that we need to take to prepare mentally so that when you're in that situation, you don't become a victim to that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt, because security is all about being proactive. We want to control the narrative, not have the narrative control us. And anybody that's watched a Jason Bourne movie knows that when you let your mind loose, if you got to get out of a bad situation, you go where you need to go. And a lot of people mentally will block off running into a store thinking they'll be trapped there. Well, they might be, or there might be a back door, because there always is a back door for loading material in. And so if you're in a street, you see that, obviously you want to go back the way you came in, because you walked down that area and you know it's safe. But this is where that whole idea of mental preparation comes in. You're constantly asking yourself, as part of your daily routine, what would I do if? What would I do if? And that's one of the things we train in terms of tactical training. Because if you anticipate someone coming out in a tactical environment and you're able to already play it out in your mind, you know who does this a lot are professional athletes. They see in their mind the play before it ever happens. And that enables the brain in that split second encounter to go, okay, I got it, and you move, rather than the panic mode, which unfortunately most people go to. So it's really important in that scenario, if you're in an urban environment, the best place to go is the way you came in, usually, because that means the street behind you is clear. You're first seeing it. And the biggest thing, especially if you're with your family, you got to cover and conceal your family. You need to get them out of there. And a lot of folks, have reached out to me and said, well, we need to stand. We do need to stand. We need to be prepared, wise, and skilled, big time skilled. But you also have to know when it's time to cover and evacuate your family. And I think the biggest thing I would say to people today, if you're going into a downtown area, which I know many of you, I think Kelly works downtown, and many of you have to navigate that. Man, I'll tell you, now is the time to pay attention on your way into the city, what's going on real time. But then, most importantly, if you work in an area, what would be my evacuation route? Is there a way to shelter safely in place? What tools do I need to get in or get out? Because I think right now is the time to prepare. We're going to see, listen to me, folks, we're going to see escalated violence in the US. This escalated crowd violence is already occurring across campuses. We're seeing the US Capitol overwhelmed with violent protests, pulling down the American flag and burning it, screaming death to America. And Matt, for you and I as Marines, that's inconceivable. I never thought I would see that happen. And yet, here we are.
And
So,
the funny
yeah,
thing about that is that as Marines, we fought for the right for them to do that. But now we have an environment where others are trying to take away our right to have that same freedom of expression, that same First Amendment.
that's right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's just that hits me so hard. It's just the image
Oh,
of people
well,
burning and tearing our flag. But you and I would both stand there and allow them to do it because that's our right.
yeah,
And others we see that in Great Britain, hundreds of people are getting arrested for liking Facebook posts or retweeting something. So I mean, it's kind of scary to think about that could possibly come here, and we know that it is here in certain ways, right? There are ways that they are, whether it's a tech company or it's the government misusing the Justice Department. People are their speech is being chilled, they're being pushed into a position where they're afraid to say anything. And back to your point about, when you're with your family, I'm out with my family, and I always have two responses: one when I'm by myself, and one when I'm with my family. When I'm with my family, I would never jeopardize their safety, their life, their security. So you're right. My first mind, if we have, if there's somebody on the side of the road who needs help, and I'm with my family, I might not respond in the same way as if I'm by myself. I might stop, offer some help by myself, and I'm with my family. It might not be the appropriate time. So the same would certainly be true in a violent mob situation. But back to your original point, or the earlier point, you said with the mental training, prepare or panic, prepare or perish, because you have mental training and you've gone through the scenarios in your mind, you've thought about it, just the act of thinking about what would I do, you could be that person who remains calm and be able to get your family out of there and keep them safe. So we do have a couple of questions. The first one is from Alita about an electricity generator. Asked if it's gasoline, then gasoline or kerosene or propane, you need to have it in the garden. I think Alita's in Europe. You would definitely need to have it outside and not close to a window, so you're not getting those fumes in the house. So that's absolutely true.
Yeah, and remember too, with anything generator related, the fuel storage issue becomes a problem. Gasoline can become corrupted over time. I always recommend, if possible, that you use natural gas. You can bury a tank, making it safer. It tends to be not so obvious, and the shelf life of natural gas is very it's pretty long. But I want to circle back around and talk about one of the things you just said, and that's protecting your family and friends. It is time for families to have a security plan. So, an example being, I'm retired law enforcement, and as such, our laws allow me, to have tools with me as part of my previous training and experience and current qualifications. But when my wife and I are anywhere, we have a protocol for what to do if something goes bad. She knows how to engage 911, what to tell them. The plan is clear. She gets safe because I don't want to have to worry about her safety. And quite frankly, if it's that bad where I cannot get her out, then she's got to stay with me, but she knows what to do. And we have that same plan for our kids and grandkids. Fortunately, my kids are adults, so they have adopted their own security plans. They know what to do. I just can't stress it enough in today's world, the importance of having a clear plan, but also skills. And quite honestly, I've had people say, oh, the training's too expensive. Okay. Well, I would view training like I would a doctor. If you have a medical condition that's serious, which we have a social condition in our country that's very serious, would you invest in the best doctor you can, or would you just invest in any doctor? And I encourage everybody, again, it doesn't have to be with us, but training and preparation now could not be more important. And my clarion call to everybody across the world is prepare, because we're seeing things. If you think about it right now, as we're having this live, Israel's anticipating a massive attack from Iran. Well, as you look at the ripple effect of that, it literally touches the world. And I think we don't necessarily understand sometimes in the cocoon of America how the global stage is being set. Like you mentioned, violence in the UK. Australia is having similar challenges. Canada, the US. Everybody is facing an onslaught of people that fundamentally have entered these countries, and they hate the culture and the traditions of the country. Even as I pointed out here, screaming death to America at our US Capitol. And so there will come a time where that friction is going to cause more and more instability. And so I think, again, being prepared, being wise, being people of prayer. I don't know how I would do it without my faith. But now is the time to prepare, because I think we all would agree we're seeing instability across the globe that I've not seen in my lifetime.
Well, and to your point, we know that the groups like we see in Great Britain right now, you have the groups of the people who've lived there for a long time, and then you have the groups of people who are being maligned because there are some bad apples in their group, but a lot of them don't assimilate, and they don't. A lot of the groups that are in the cities, they're coming to blows with each other. They're starting to fight, and the government will not be able to control it. There won't be enough
That's
police
right.
officers in those
That's
cases.
right.
That will come here eventually, or that could come here eventually. So that's one half of it. But the other half of it is that if you have a broadening more in Israel, so they Iran attacks, they get through, they kill a bunch of civilians. Israel goes back and smashes them, and then involves, explodes this into a regional war where other countries get involved, or even just, Israel fighting Iran with all their their allies, or Russia, China. I mean, it's crazy to think about what's potentially could happen. But if that does happen in the next few hours, in the next few days, in the next few weeks, which is what it's being predicted to happen. Iran says that they will attack, they will respond, and Israel says if you do, we're going to go all in. So let's say that does happen in the short term. What does that look like for the groups that now, some estimates are that there are thousands of new terrorists in this country who've come over to prepare for what's about to happen. So that, in other words, if they go to war there, our military is there protecting Israel, shooting down rockets, shooting down missiles, and then they get a message here to do something here. What does that look like, and how do we prepare for that?
Yeah, so that's probably the greatest challenge the U.S. has now. We've never invited the enemy in the front door of our house and said, hey, we hope everything works out with you. That's what we've done at our southern border. We have folks that cross, and that's part of what our team does, that we know they were battlefield commanders in Syria. We've seen ISIS reconstituted, with a homegrown attack in Austria a couple weeks ago. Well, when you look at that, it's horrifying because remember, you have the organized folks, the Al Qaeda's, ISIS, that are tied in. They're networked, they're fully trained and prepared. But then you have the lone wolves. And the lone wolves are potentially even more dangerous because it's very hard to identify them. It's very hard to pick up on the planning. Fortunately, in Austria, at the Taylor Swift concert, they were fortunate enough to get some leads. But the dynamics of that attack is scary. They weren't going to hit the concert. They knew there'd be security in the concert. They were going to hit the massive crowds outside with no, practical security and certainly no capability to protect that number of folks. So I want to really challenge everybody listening. What we saw on October 7th is a primer for what's going to happen in other countries. This level of evil knows one thing: steal, kill, and destroy. That's all they want. They want ultimately control of the nations. That's what the goal is. But we've got to be prepared. That's where places, we do a lot of corporate Fortune 500 companies because a lot of companies are waking up now and go, wait a minute, we better have a plan to protect our employees. And so we work with them. But to your point earlier, we're also working with a lot of houses of worship and schools, especially faith-based schools, because traditionally they don't have the resources. But folks, we're going to see that level and types of attack continue in the US. And it's really important, if you're on a school board, that you ask the questions. Hey, how are we dealing with potentially what's coming? Not through fear, but through wisdom and preparation. Because if you're not ready when the attack happens, it won't go well. And unfortunately, what happens is, like we saw at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz. He did the attack, and then after that, they started, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. Well, wouldn't it be awesome if we were able to suggest to leadership, hey, now is the time to invest? Because remember, security is proactive. We want to make it not happen. We don't want to clean up the mess afterwards.
Amen. And Hannah says the only thing that comes to steal, kill, and destroy is the enemy. And if you just look at what's happening, there's a lot of evil out there. You can feel it. Michael's here. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you. Someone commented, I thought this was an Nunchuck channel, which is funny because there are nunchucks here, but this is a safety and security channel. It's a self-defense channel. That's why I do this, and that's why we have Tim Miller here from Lionheart. And if you haven't followed Tim is here on YouTube at Lionheart Skills, or just type in Tim Miller Security. You'll find all the things that he's doing for different TV channels, and find his own channel, and then go over there, subscribe. I put the link to your course in the description below. And we were talking recently about who comes to your course, and I want to talk about that in a second. But when you were talking about the Taylor Swift concert and security inside versus no security outside, it made me think that you can have security there, and where I'm from in Dayton, or most recently before we moved here to Florida, there was an active shooter. He came in, and I forget how many he was able to shoot and kill. I think he injured 30 some, killed something like 17. And it all happened within 37 seconds. The police were there, they engaged him, they killed him in 37 seconds. But the point is, or the point to that is that you have to be prepared not to wait for someone else to take action, protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your children, protect your grandchildren. If you can do some training to, prepare. If there's a home invasion and you call the police as they're breaking into your home, police are going to be there in 3 to 4 minutes, which is great. And it's not fast enough. If you're
Right.
prepared to keep them out of your home, to stop them from coming in the first place, then the police will still come, but it'll be a much different story than if they get in and they're able to do horrible things in those 3 to 4 minutes.
That's right.
And the same thing. I was at the airport recently, coming back from an international trip. I watched this sheriff's deputy just staring at his phone, watching some show for 40 some minutes, never looked up, never saw what was around. This is an airport where a few years ago, a man got off the plane, went to the bathroom in his checked in luggage, takes out a gun, loads it, goes out and starts shooting people to death.
Yep.
I was at a massive concert in Nashville recently, and I didn't send you, I often send you the pictures when I see these, but I took a bunch of pictures of armed security and armed law enforcement who were there for security. There were a lot of them there, but again, just stuck staring at their phone and with no situational awareness, no idea what's happened. We saw in the Osteen church recently, when the shooter came into that church, walked right by a police officer, and got engaged, down the hallway in a different part of the building. And the police officer, if he had been paying attention and not looking at his phone, could have stopped him at the door, because he would have seen, obviously, the guy's got a gun under his jacket or her jacket or whatever. But my point is, you have to be prepared to be your own first responder. You have to be your own executive protection security detail captain, a person who's taking responsibility for yourself and your family. So how, when we talked about it recently about the courses that you have coming up, you mentioned you have people who have this mindset or have had the experience of a home invasion, and then they said, I need to get this kind of training. What is it that you've seen, and who are coming to your courses, and how does it help?
Well, it kind of everybody's coming because you touched on it before, and this is not a sales course for my courses, but we bring guys in. All of our guys are professional instructors. They're high level shooters coming from variety of military. Their full-time roles are training new agents at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So they're coming with not only the expertise out of the special ops community, but their job is to take people wherever they are, to give them the skills of being comfortable with their weapon, and then the ability to know when to use their weapon. And so that is liquid gold, because many try to learn on their own. They listen to YouTube channels, and then under that crisis period where they got to have the foundational skills, they don't have it. But to your point, it all starts. The reason those officers were on the phone is because they didn't think it was going to happen there. Interestingly enough, I've been to Israel 7 times. You never see that in Israel with their police. They are always alert and aware. I think there's a prohibition. They can't use their phones in public.
That's good.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if you don't see it first, and this is part of what we train, there's a process for every human to go through. You got to observe, orient, decide, and act. Those are the cycles, and we go into more of that brain training, so to speak. But if you don't have the ability to see it first, then that means that the bad person has the ability to see you first, and now you're behind the mental and the practical response curve. So our goal is to train people to see it, and then the skills needed to protect against it. And again, if it's again, I just want people to be prepared. Unfortunately, I've seen personally what it looks like when they're not, and the carnage. And there's just a passion from our team to help prepare people. But I do want to remind everybody, the greatest enemy of your security today is this stupid phone that everybody's got their nose in. When you're out and about, just one thing from the video today: put that phone away. If there's an audible alarm where you can pick it up and you can listen and talk and still be observant, that's one thing. But you absolutely should not disregard your personal safety and security to pay attention to a text that will be there if you just get to a safe place and then utilize your phone. The other thing is just the constant mindset of being alert and aware and asking yourself, wow, what would I do if there was a crowd around that corner? You picture that. Okay, well, maybe I duck in here or maybe there. The good news is every time you do that, you're creating a file in your mind that you can refer to, that it's an emergency file. And so instead of trying to figure it out when it's happening right in front of you, which is what causes many people to panic, you're that person that knows what to do. You're that person that says, hey, I've already played this in my mind. I'm going to be good to go. But it is so important, Matt, to your point. Every person needs to be their own security detail leader. We may or may not get police support these days. Many are understaffed, or the response time is just too long. And you know, I've been in situations where I hear the sirens in the distance, and I'm hoping that I can hang on, fighting for my life for 60 to 90 to 2 minutes. That is an eternity of time that, if we're wise and prepared ahead of time, that we may not have to face.
That's excellent advice. And I know you mentioned it earlier, your course also goes over medical response, stop the bleed, how to use some of the basic things to keep somebody
Right?
alive long enough to get them to the hospital. And I know Paige said that, where she lives, it's 30 minutes before the police get there. And
Wow.
so that's a report and an investigation. That is not saving you at
That's
all.
right.
By
That's
30
right.
minutes later, we know it's over. We know it's over within seconds in most cases. And
That's right.
so, all the
Yeah.
things that you're saying, being prepared so that you don't perish, being prepared so that you don't have to panic, because you've created just a simple map in your head of where you're going to go, what you're going to do. And then I think earlier you were talking about how you talk to your family, how you talk to your wife, and you talk it through. I do that a lot when we go big places with my kids, new places. We talk about where we're going to meet if we get separated. Who do you talk to get back to me? I drill them on the phone number. What's my phone number? What's your mom's phone number? If you can't reach us, who else can you reach? And then if something happens, and my wife is great about this, she'll even bring it up before I do. Okay, if there's an active shooter, what are we going to do? If someone comes up with a gun, what are we going to do? We're going to give them our money. We're going to give them the phone if that's what they want. But then what if it's more than that? How do we protect our life, our family, our children? How do we protect the things that are most precious to us that we can't get back? We can always get more money. We can always get a new phone, but we can't replace our wife, our husband, our friends, ourselves, our health, our dignity, our freedom, and our children. And so we have to be prepared for that. Well, this has been a great discussion. I appreciate so much you coming on here. I was just seeing if there were any other comments in there. A lot of great comments, not a lot of questions, but George says his wife and in-law won't go shopping alone. Now he has to do shopping, which is, that's a man's job, is to protect the family. So I get it. I understand. It's a shame that people are so afraid that they can't do the things that they used to do. I know a lot of people who won't go to concerts anymore because they're afraid of what's been happening around the world, and they're just not going to risk it. And and it's almost like I've said this many times. If you're in your house, if I'm sitting here, you're sitting there, the fire alarm starts to go off. You get up, you see where it is. If it's a real fire, you get out of the house. You wait for the call the fire department, wait for them to come, get everybody else out. Uh, you don't just sit down with the alarm going off and say, "Oh well, I guess I'm going to burn to death." I can see the fire; it's coming closer. Pretty soon, I won't be able to breathe because of the smoke. You take some action. So when we look at the craziness of the world, and it's coming from all these different sources, we've got terrorists, we've got homegrown, we've got defund the police, we've got the no cash bail, we've got in England, they're talking about pushing 40% of the criminals out of jail onto the streets because they don't have enough room. You wonder who they're making the room for, but you're pushing them out. And then these are all alarm bells, and these alarms are going off just like the fire alarm. But you just sit there and think, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. It's so horrible. I guess I'm done. It doesn't happen like that. You hear the alarm, you get out of the house, you call the police. In this case, you sign up for a course, You learn some self-defense, you buy extra water, you buy some food that's going to be shelf stable for a long time. You get a power source in case you got to, whatever it is, you take some action, and then you don't feel so terrified all the time. You don't stop going out and living your daily life. You might not go to the concerts, but you're going to go about your daily life because you have prepared. You don't have this great sense of gloom and doom because you're afraid of everything. You see the threat and you take some action. The hurricane's coming here to where we live in South Florida. They give us like a week in advance most of the time. Sometimes they turn course and it's a little bit less. But when it's coming, everybody goes to the store, they get their water, they get their food, they get their power supplies, they buy batteries, they fill up the car, they make sure their generator's ready, they make sure all the shutters close on their house if that's what they've got. But you take action when that alarm bell's ringing, and all we have to do is look outside and see the news. And I don't believe in like consuming the news so much that it puts you in a bad state. I think you pay attention to what's happening, hear the crazy stories around the world, and say, okay, those alarm bells are going off. How do I get prepared so that if that tsunami does come to my shore, or that storm comes here, or that fire goes off, then I'm prepared, and I have an idea of what I can do. And that's, of course, is like yours offer a sense peace of mind. This sense of, and that's why back to your when we're talking about costs of courses like what you do. I always look at it like when I invest in healthy food for myself and my family, and I get exercise, however that is, whether I pay for it or not, those are all investments that are a fraction of what a hospital stay would cost. So, in other words, if you don't take a little proactive action and keep yourself healthy, then you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you have a cancer, you get diabetes type 2 because of your lifestyle. That's going to cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Eating healthy might be expensive when you're buying the food, but it's a fraction compared to what that is. Having the peace of mind that taking a course like you offer, or the things that I teach or anybody else teaches, that creates a peace of mind for a fraction of the cost that a real event would. If you were a victim of a violent assault, if have a home invasion and they hurt you or your family, if you're out in a crowd and you get stuck because you haven't prepared and you get injured or killed, you can't compare to spending 3 or 4 days on the range in the classroom learning how to mentally prepare, and you'll be so much better.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
agree.
so I would just
Let me
wanted to end
just
on that.
Yeah, let me just encourage your audience. This is not doom and gloom, and I know we're coming across. This is just simple wisdom. Even talking to your kids about active violence, there are a lot of parents that don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
I would much rather our kids be talked to by us in a spirit of, hey, just like we did in the 60s with the nuclear threat, get under the desk, that kind of stuff. I think it can be a very positive thing. But I just want to really highlight, I don't live my life in fear. There's a lot of negative things going on, but I live my life intentionally so that I'm prepared to help others. That's what I would challenge everybody listening. Be that person that your family can count on, that your friends can count on, because you're wise and prepared. You're not fearful. You're not lurking around the bad person's not lurking around every corner. And yet you're the person that's wise. And so I appreciate you having me on today. I really do. I hope and pray that this is helpful information for everybody. I would highly recommend, just kind of back to Matt, no matter how old we are or the physical condition, we can make a difference. We can be prepared with what we have if we're willing to invest a little bit of time and training and effort and maybe some sweat. To
yeah,
be,
absolutely.
yeah.
Sweat's
So
good.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for doing this. We'll talk again, and we'll have another conversation as another situational report set rep in the future, and with more tips and advice, because I know you've got way more than we even touched on today. If people are interested in
Yeah.
your course, I put the description below. Even if you just want to go see what it looks like, just go and visit that, and take a look and see if it's something that you could even recreate if you're not able to come. The nice thing about your courses are they're here in sunny Florida when things start to get a little cold up north. and
Yeah.
gray. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we can come down and get out of the cold.
Yeah. October and
So
November is beautiful in Florida.
yeah, yeah. One of the comments was hiding under the desk in the event of a nuke. That's funny because that's what they always told us when we were kids.
That's right.
Even
Yeah.
back then, as a kid, we knew that that wasn't right. But
Yeah. Yeah.
that was all
But
they could tell us to do.
yeah,
Now,
and that's pretty sad,
yeah,
but
that is sad. All
I
right.
think
Well, I
we've got a lot
appreciate
better.
you,
Yeah.
and
Thank you, brother.
we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, guys. Be
And
safe.
thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for all the comments and the questions. And we'll see you later.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.